The gown weighed 40 pounds, woven from spun glass and filament that was designed to catch the light of the twin suns and fracture it into a blinding prism. It was not a garment. It was an architectural marvel of the Aurelian Empire, and inside it, Lyra Vile felt less like a bride and more like a specimen pinned to a velvet board. She stood motionless on the observation deck of Seraph Spire, the floating capital city that defied the planetary gravity through the brute force of magnetic blooms. Outside the Armaglass, the city was a dizzying choreography of wealth. Spires of gold and white ceramic drifted in slow, rhythmic circles, unconnected to the ground, held aloft by engines that hummed with a sound like a choir holding a single, breathless note. Drones the size of hummingbirds wove threads of hard light between the towers, creating artificial constellations that celebrated the glory of the empire. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was a cage. Lyra shifted her weight, the gown hissing against the floor. She checked the chronometer embedded in her wrist bracelet, a piece of jewelry that monitored her heart rate, temperature, and location. The Aurelians called it a bridal gift. Lyra knew it was a shackle to the galaxy. Lyra Vile was the symbol of the new armistice. She was the daughter of a fallen noble house, possessing the rare genetic markers required to marry into the lower rungs of the imperial line, a union that would supposedly stay the hand of the Aurelian Armada and save the fragile Terran coalition from total annihilation. The media called her the Peace Bride. They praised her elegance, her silence, her dutiful eyes. They did not know that beneath the spun glass, Lyra was calculating the structural integrity of the floor. They did not know she was a bioluminal cryptographer who had spent 10 years studying the ancestral governance codes of the very people who were now buying her. She was not silent because she was submissive. She was silent because she was observing. The door to her chamber slid open with a pneumatic hush. "Lady Vale," a voice said. "The security delegation is here to sweep the room for the final time." Lyra turned. The movement required effort, the dress dragging like a dead weight. "Let them in," she said. A squad of soldiers entered. They wore the charcoal gray armor of the Terran coalition, a stark contrast to the flowing white and gold robes of the Aurelian guards waiting in the hallway. The Terrans looked tired. Their armor was scuffed, their weapons strictly regulation. They were the losers of the last war, here only by the grace of the Empire. Leading them was a man who seemed to take up too much space for the room. He was not tall, but he moved with a density, a center of gravity that suggested it would take a battering ram to knock him over. He had a square jaw, gray eyes that scanned the room in a grid pattern, and a scar running through his left eyebrow that ruined the symmetry of an otherwise severe face. Captain Elias Kane, head of special security for the Terran delegation. He did not bow. He did not smile. He looked at Lyra, then looked past her to the window, then to the vents. "Clear the perimeter," Elias said to his team. His voice was gravel over steel. "Check the radiation scrubbers again. The Empire likes to hide listeners in the airflow." Lyra watched him. She had read his file, highly decorated, dishonorably discharged for refusing to fire on a civilian transport, then quietly reinstated when the coalition realized they needed men who could actually fight. He was described as difficult. "You are thorough, Captain," Lyra said. Her voice was cool, practiced. Elias paused near a decorative vase that probably cost more than his ship. He looked at her. "I am alive, Lady Vale," he said. "Being thorough is usually the reason why. You do not trust the Aurelian security? I do not trust anyone who smiles that much while holding a shock spear," Elias said. He pulled a scanner from his belt and ran it over the window frame. You are the most valuable asset in the sector right now. If you die, the ceasefire breaks. If the ceasefire breaks, Earth burns. I intend to keep you breathing. Asset, Lyra repeated. Is that the official terminology? Elias stopped scanning. He looked her in the eye. For a moment, the professional distance vanished, replaced by a flash of blunt, unapologetic honesty. It is the only terminology that matters to the people paying for this wedding, he said. You are a treaty with a pulse. I am the insurance policy. Lyra felt a flicker of amusement, the first genuine emotion she had felt in weeks. He was rude. It was refreshing. I suppose I should be grateful for the insurance, she said. Though I admit, I expected the coalition to send a diplomat to hold my hand, not a soldier to check the vents. Diplomats are useless when things explode, Elias said. He tapped the glass. This integrity field is oscillating at a low frequency. It is weak. He turned to one of his squad. Note it. Tell the Aurelian House Guard to boost the power output on the eastern face. He looked back at Lyra. We will be escorting you to the gala tonight. Lady Vile, stay within 2 meters of me or my team. Do not accept drinks from anyone unless you see them pour it. Do not go to the bathroom alone. Do not wander off to look at the pretty lights. Lyra raised an eyebrow. And if I do, then I will carry you back over my shoulder, Elias said. And that dress looks expensive. It would be a shame to wrinkle it. He turned and marched out, his squad falling in behind him. Lyra watched him go. For the first time, she did not feel entirely alone in the Shark Tank. The pre-wedding gala was an assault on the senses. The great hall of Seraph Spire was a cavernous space where the ceiling was a hologram of the galaxy, swirling in real time. The floor was transparent, revealing the dizzying drop to the planet's surface miles below. Guests walked on air, sipping nectar that glowed neon blue, surrounded by music that wasn't played but rather vibrated through the bone. Lyra stood on a raised dais, a mannequin on display. High-ranking Aurelian nobles drifted past, their skin dusted with gold, their eyes modified to resemble feline slits. They bowed, but the gesture was mocking. They touched her hand with cold fingers. The Terran delegation was huddled in the corner, looking uncomfortable in their dress blues. Elias Kane was there, standing at the edge of the perimeter, his back to a pillar. He held a glass of water that he hadn't touched for an hour. His eyes never stopped moving. Lyra kept her expression serene, but her ears were tuned to the ambient chatter. The acoustics of the hall were designed to carry whispers, a feature the Aurelians used for espionage but one Lyra used for survival. She is smaller than I expected, a duchess murmured, hiding her mouth behind a fan of peacock feathers. Frail. Humans are soft, a general replied. He wore a sash covered in medals from the bombardment of the Mars colony. It does not matter. She only needs to last until the signatures are dry. And if she does not? The general laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. Then we mourn. We blame a rogue faction. And we finish the conquest. The Emperor grows tired of this peace charade. Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She took a sip of her drink to hide the tremor in her hand. They were not planning a marriage. They were planning a funeral. She signaled her need for fresh air. And the Aurelian protocol droid hovering at her shoulder beeped its compliance. She moved toward the balcony, the crowd parting like water. As she passed a shadowy alcove near the kitchen service entrance, a hand reached out and grasped her wrist. Lyra stiffened, ready to scream. But a voice hissed in her ear, "Quiet, child." She turned. It was an Aurelian, but not a noble. He wore the coarse, unadorned robes of the priest analysts, the religious caste that maintained the empire's data shrines. His face was old, the skin folding over his cybernetic eye implants. "Do not make a scene," he whispered. "Let go of me," Lyra said, her voice low. "You are walking into a furnace," the priest said. His organic eye was wide with fear. "The stars do not favor this union. The data streams are corrupted. What are you talking about?" "The bride who won't survive the vows," he recited as if reading from a screen only he could see. "The algorithm of the succession is shifting. They need a tragedy, not a treaty." "Who is they?" Lyra demanded. The priest gripped her harder, his cybernetic eye whirred, focusing on something behind her. "The meridian," he gasped. Suddenly, he jerked back. A red dot appeared on his forehead. Before Lyra could blink, he melted back into the shadows, vanishing as if he had never been there. "Lady Vael." Lyra spun around. Captain Elias Kane was standing there. He looked from her to the empty alcove. "You are outside the perimeter," he said. Lyra's heart was hammering against her ribs. She smoothed the front of her gown. "I needed air, Captain." Elias narrowed his eyes. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of gun oil and synthetic soap. "You look like you just saw a ghost," he said. "Maybe I did," Lyra replied. "Or maybe just a glitch in the perfect Aurelian system." Elias didn't buy it. He scanned the alcove, his hand hovering near the stun baton at his hip. "We are leaving," he said. "This crowd is getting too dense. The threat index is rising." He placed a hand on the small of her back. It was a professional touch, but the heat of his palm burned through the thin fabric of her dress. For a second, Lyra wanted to grab his lapels and tell him everything, the general's words, the priest's warning, the feeling of doom settling in her gut. But she couldn't. He was a soldier. He followed orders, and his orders were to see her married. "Take me back to the tower." "Elias," she said softly. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second, the harsh lines of his face softened. "Copy that," he said. "Let's get you out of here." The wedding day dawned with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The ceremony was to take place in the Celestial Plaza, an open-air amphitheater capable of seating 50,000 guests. The air was filled with the scent of crushed ozone and exotic flowers. Lyra stood at the entrance to the long procession aisle. The music swelled, a thunderous orchestral piece that shook the ground. Ahead of her, the imperial heir, Prince Valerius, waited on a podium of floating obsidian. He was young, cruel, and beautiful, draped in the purple of the royal house. Elias was 10 meters to her left, walking parallel to the procession route. He was speaking into his comms, his expression tight. Lyra began to walk, 1 step, 2. The gravity generators beneath the floor made her feel light, ethereal. The crowd cheered, a roar of sound that felt aggressive. She looked at Prince Valerius. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his chrono. Something was wrong. Lyra's scientific mind kicked in. The drone formation overhead was off. The pattern was supposed to be a double helix, but 3 of the heavy lift drones were lagging, drifting out of alignment. They were drifting toward the podium. She stopped. The music faltered. The crowd murmured, "Lady Vale?" A protocol droid beeped at her side. "You must proceed." "No," Lyra whispered. She looked to the left. She locked eyes with Elias. "Get down!" she screamed. She didn't wait for him to understand. She threw herself to the ground, abandoning all dignity, curling into a ball beneath the layers of her dress. The world turned white. The explosion did not come from the ground. It came from the sky. The 3 lagging drones dived, their power cores overloading in a synchronized detonation. The shockwave hit Lyra like a physical blow, rolling her across the polished stone. Heat seared the air. The sound was deafening, a crack that shattered the windows of the surrounding towers. Debris rained down. Smoke, thick and oily, filled the plaza. Lyra coughed, her lungs burning. She pushed herself up. Her dress was torn, stained with soot. The podium was gone. In its place was a crater of twisted metal and slag. Prince Valerius was nowhere to be seen. Lyra scrambled backward, her hands slipping in the ash. Freeze! A dozen Aurelian royal guards materialized from the smoke, their weapons raised. But they weren't pointing at the crater. They were pointing at her. Lyra Vile, a voice boomed. A holographic projection flickered to life above the chaos. It was the High Chancellor of the Empire. Seize the traitor! Traitor! Lyra gasped. She tried to stand. I tried to warn him. The guards didn't listen. One of them struck her with the butt of a rifle. Pain exploded in her temple. She fell, the world spinning, and through the haze, she saw movement. Elias Kane was fighting. He was taking down guards with brutal efficiency, trying to cut a path to her. Stand down, Captain, a Terran voice shouted over the comms. Stand down or we open fire on your squad. Elias froze. He looked at Lyra, blood running down his own face. He looked at his men, who were surrounded by hundreds of Imperial soldiers. He couldn't save her, not without starting a massacre. Lyra met his eyes. She shook her head slightly. Don't. The Aurelian guards grabbed her, hauling her up by her arms. They dragged her away from the light, into the belly of the waiting transport. The tribunal was less a trial and more a piece of theater. It convened 3 hours after the explosion. Lyra sat in a chair in the center of a circular room. Her wrists were bound in stasis cuffs that hummed with a suppression field, making her arms feel numb. She had not been allowed to wash the soot from her face. The High Chancellor stood on a raised platform. The evidence is irrefutable, he declared. A giant screen displayed a video feed. It showed the wedding procession. It showed Lyra stopping. It showed her tapping her wrist bracelet, the one given to her by the Empire. Then, on the screen, the drones dived. The implication was clear. She had signaled the attack. It's a lie, Lyra said, her voice raspy. That footage is doctored. I was checking the time. Silence, the Chancellor roared. We have recovered the data logs from the drones. They were hacked using a Terran encryption key, a key found in your personal quarters. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face. It was a frame-up, a perfect seamless frame-up, in the viewing gallery, shielded by a wall of energy. Elias Kane stood with the Terran ambassador. This is insane, Elias hissed. Look at the timestamps on the footage. There is a micro-jump. 4 frames are missing right before she taps her wrist. The ambassador wiped sweat from his forehead. Captain, keep your voice down. The prince is in critical condition. The Empire is screaming for blood. It is a setup, Elias said. The trajectory of the drones. They didn't come from the perimeter. They came from the royal hangar. This was an inside job. We cannot say that, the ambassador said. If we accuse the Empire of bombing their own air, they will glass Earth. We have to let the process play out. The process, Elias growled. He looked down at Lyra, alone in the circle of light. That is not a process. That is a slaughter. On the floor. The Chancellor raised his hand. Lyra Vile, for the crime of high treason, attempted regicide, and the sabotage of the galactic peace. This tribunal finds you guilty. Lyra lifted her chin. She would not cry. She would not give them the satisfaction. You do not want justice, she said clearly. You want a war. The Chancellor smiled, a cold, thin expression. We want order, he said, He gestured to the guards. Bind her in the penitent's veil. 2 guards approached carrying a silver collar studded with neural spikes. They clamped it around Lyra's neck. She gasped as the needles pricked her skin, interfacing with her nervous system. It was a ceremonial restraint tech, designed to amplify shame. It forced her head down, preventing her from looking anyone in the eye. It was a public humiliation device. "The sentence is death," the Chancellor announced. A gasp went through the gallery. To allow the galaxy to witness the price of betrayal, the execution will be broadcast live to all sectors. The screen behind him changed. It showed a countdown. 72 hours. 3 days, the Chancellor said. In 3 days, at the hour of the eclipse, Lyra Vial will be cast from the spire. May her fall remind us of the gravity of our laws. Lyra stared at the floor, forced into submission by the collar, tears finally leaking from her eyes. She saw her own reflection in the polished black stone, a broken bride. Up in the gallery, Elias Kane stopped looking at the Chancellor. He stopped looking at the ambassador. He looked at the countdown. 3 days. He looked at the security feed on his personal datapad. He isolated the 4 missing frames. He zoomed in on the drones. He saw something the tribunal had ignored. A shadow painted on the hull of the lead drone. A symbol, a serpent eating its own tail. The Meridian Syndicate. Elias holstered his datapad. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Where are you going, Captain?" the ambassador asked. "To my ship," Elias said. "We are confined to quarters until the execution," the ambassador warned. "Do not do anything stupid, Kane." Elias didn't look back. "I am done with politics, sir." He walked out of the gallery, his boots ringing on the metal floor. The countdown on the giant screen ticked down. 71 hours, 59 minutes, 50 seconds. The galaxy was waiting for a show. Elias Kane decided he was going to give them a different one. The office of the Terran ambassador was a bubble of sterilized air and faux mahogany paneling, designed to look like a club room in London or New York, but feeling entirely like a bunker. Captain Elias Kane stood before the desk, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid enough to snap a spine. "I am requesting a joint investigation," Elias said. His voice was low, vibrating with the kind of restraint that usually preceded a fight. "The data does not add up. The drone telemetry was spoofed from inside the palace network. If we do not push for a forensic audit, we are complicit in a judicial murder." Ambassador Sterling did not look up from his datapad. He was a man who had survived 30 years of stellar diplomacy by knowing exactly when to be deaf. "Request denied. Captain." "Sir." Elias stepped forward, his boot thudding on the carpet. "We are talking about the execution of a key political figure based on evidence that wouldn't hold up in a municipal traffic court. If Lyra Vial dies on that spire, the narrative is set. Humanity becomes the enemy again." Sterling finally looked up. His eyes were tired, rimmed with the red of stress-induced insomnia. "The narrative is already set, Kane. The Aurelian High Council has made up its mind. If we push back now, they will see it as an act of aggression. Our trade routes in the Kestrel sector are already being blockaded. Do you want to be the man who starts the second interstellar war because you have a hunch about a security glitch?" "It is not a hunch," Elias said. "It is a fact. The surveillance nodes were tampered with." "Drop it," Sterling said. "That is an order. We are in damage control mode. Our priority is to get the delegation off-world safely after the event." Elias stared at the man. He saw the fear there. It was the specific sour fear of a bureaucrat who realized he was expendable. "You are leaving her to die," Elias said. I am saving the rest of us, Sterling corrected. You are dismissed, Captain. Go secure the landing pad. Make sure our shuttle is ready to lift the moment the execution is confirmed. Elias turned and walked out. He did not salute. The detention wing of the Seraph Spire was known as the Hall of Penance. It was not a prison in the utilitarian sense. It was a cathedral of suffering. The air was kept at a freezing temperature, designed to slow the pulse and dull the mind. The walls were high, carved from black obsidian, and lined with holographic frescoes that moved with agonizing slowness. Lyra Vale sat on a stone bench in the center of her cell. The penitent's veil was still locked around her neck, the neural spikes sending intermittent jolts of phantom pain down her spine to keep her docile. She was shivering, but she refused to hug herself. She looked at the walls. The frescoes depicted the traitor brides of history, women who had failed the empire, betrayed their lords, or simply become inconvenient. There was Kalia, who was airlocked for bearing a daughter. There was Elara, who was disassembled by drones for whispering during a prayer. Their faces were rendered in weeping light, their eyes following Lyra wherever she moved. It was psychological warfare. They wanted her to feel part of a lineage of failure. Lyra stared back at Kalia's weeping face. You were not a traitor, Lyra whispered, her voice cracking in the cold. You were just in the way. The force field at the front of her cell shimmered. The hum of the dampeners cut out. Lyra stiffened, expecting the guards, or perhaps a priest come to offer her a final chance to confess to crimes she hadn't committed. Instead, a gray uniform stepped through the field. Captain Kane, Lyra said. She tried to inject the usual mockery into her tone, but it came out brittle. She was exhausted, terrified, and the cold was eating into her bones. Elias did not speak immediately. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, spherical device. He set it on the floor. It hummed, creating a localized distortion bubble. Audio jammer, he said. We have 2 minutes before the sensors realize the feed is looping. Lyra looked at the device, then up at him. You are taking a significant risk, Captain. If they catch you, they will add a second pike to the execution wall. Elias walked to the bench. He took off his heavy uniform jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of his body heat lingering in the fabric hit her like a physical shock. She pulled it tight, burying her nose in the collar. It smelled of coffee and gunmetal. I spoke to the maintenance crew in Sector 4, Elias said, ignoring her comment about the risk, the ones responsible for the perimeter sensors. And they were rotated out 3 hours before the wedding, he said, replaced by a private contractor team that doesn't exist in the official registry. The work order was signed by a biometric seal that belongs to a dead man. Lyra let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded jagged. Standard Aurelian efficiency, she said. They did not even bother to fake a living signature. Why would they? No one questions the will of the spire. I question it, Elias said. Lyra looked up at him. His face was grim, shadows pooling in the hollows of his cheeks. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week, a man walking a razor's edge between duty and treason. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? Your ambassador has undoubtedly ordered you to pack your bags and let the alien girl burn. He did, Elias admitted. Then why are you here? Elias looked at the fresco of Kalia on the wall. He studied the weeping light for a moment before meeting Lyra's gaze. Because I checked the logs, he said. You didn't signal the drones. You signaled a warning. You tried to save the prince. Lyra felt a lump form in her throat. It was a painful, hot pressure. For 3 days, the entire galaxy had been calling her a monster. Hearing one person speak the truth felt like a structural collapse inside her chest. "It doesn't matter what I did," Lyra said quietly. "The script is written. I am the villain. You are the bystander. The prince is dead or dying, and war is profitable. The prince is stable," Elias said. "That is the other thing the news isn't telling you. He is in a healing coma. He will survive, which means the assassination wasn't meant to kill him. It was meant to kill the peace." Lyra's mind raced, the cold momentarily forgotten. If Valerius lives, then the succession remains secure. This wasn't a coup. It was a provocation. "Exactly," Elias said. He crouched down so he was eye level with her. "Listen to me, Lyra. I am going to get you out of here." She stared at him. The absurdity of the statement almost made her laugh again. "Captain, we are in the middle of a floating city surrounded by 10,000 elite guards. I am wearing a neural suppression collar. You are one man with a jamming device. This is not a rescue mission. It is a suicide pact." "I am not asking for your permission to try," Elias said. "I am telling you that I am not leaving this planet without you." "Why?" she pressed, her voice trembling. "Is it because you want to be a hero? Because you think I am a damsel?" "No," Elias said. His voice was hard, stripping away the romance of the moment. "Because I have spent 20 years following orders that got good people killed to balance a spreadsheet. I am done. I am not leaving you because it is the right thing to do. I am leaving with you because if I don't, I will never be able to look in a mirror again." The jammer on the floor beeped. 1-minute warning. Lyra looked at him. She saw the stubborn set of his jaw, the resolve in his gray eyes. He was not a knight in shining armor. He was a soldier who had found a hill he was willing to die on. "You are a fool, Elias Kane," she whispered. "I have been called worse," he said. He stood up. "Stay ready. When the prayer hour strikes, be near the door." He deactivated the jammer, pocketed it, and stepped back through the force field just as the hum of the dampeners returned. Back aboard his ship, the Aegis, docked in the diplomat's hangar. Elias paced the small bridge. "Maury, pull up the restricted feed from the maintenance sector again." Maury, the ship's AI, manifested as a voice that sounded like a bored university professor. "Captain, I feel obligated to remind you that hacking the Imperial subnet is a Class 1 felony. If they trace this, they will not just execute us. They will delete my source code and turn you into a decorative paperweight." "Just do it," Elias said. "I am already doing it," Maury replied. "I have been doing it for 20 minutes. You really need to work on your patience. By the way, your heart rate suggests you are either having a cardiac event or you are in love. Which is it? Because I have protocols for the heart attack, but the love issue is outside my operational parameters. Focus." "Maury." "I am in," the AI said, patching audio through. The bridge speakers crackled. Elias heard voices. Harsh, guttural Aurelian dialects mixed with the clipped tones of a synthetic vocoder. "Payment is confirmed. The syndicate requires the asset liquidated before the transfer." "The bride?" "No, you idiot. The courier. He knows too much about the drone override." Elias froze. "Where is that signal coming from?" "Triangulating," Maury said. "It is close. Sector 7, the waste processing level beneath the detention block." "That is near Lyra," Elias said. He grabbed his sidearm. "Captain," Maury warned, "if you leave the ship now, the ambassador will know." "Let him know," Elias said. "Keep monitoring that frequency. If they mention the bride again, record it." Elias moved through the lower levels of Seraph Spire like a ghost. He had swapped his dress uniform for tactical gear, black composite armor that absorbed light. He moved through the steam-filled maintenance tunnels, guided by Maury's whispers in his earpiece. Left at the junction, Maury said. Hostiles ahead. 3 of them. Elias slid into an alcove. 3 figures in dark robes passed by. They were not priests. They moved with the prowling grace of assassins. He waited for them to pass, then continued. He found the courier in a narrow service corridor. The man was an Aurelian, dressed in civilian clothes, slumped against a pipe. His chest was a ruin of cauterized burns. Elias knelt beside him. Easy, he said. The courier's eyes snapped open. They were gold, clouded with shock. They knew. The courier gasped. Who knew? Elias asked. The Syndicate. The Meridian. The courier fumbled inside his jacket. His hand came away bloody, holding a data shard. It was cracked down the middle. Take it. He wheezed. Proof. Elias took the shard. It was warm. Proof of what? The courier gripped Elias's arm with surprising strength. The war is a product. They sell the conflict, both sides. The man convulsed, a final spasm rocking his body, and then he was gone. Elias stared at the body, both sides. He slotted the broken shard into his wrist computer. Maury analyzed it instantly. Captain, this data is fragmented, Maury said, his voice devoid of its usual sarcasm. But I am reading transaction logs. Massive credit transfers between the Aurelian Ministry of Defense and a shell company registered in the Terran Coalition. Who owns the shell company? Elias asked, already dreading the answer. It is obscured, Maury said. But the encryption key matches the diplomatic clearance codes used by Ambassador Sterling's office. Elias closed his eyes. It wasn't just incompetence. It was collusion. The Terran delegation wasn't refusing to investigate because they were afraid of war. They were refusing because they were paid to ensure it happened. Lyra wasn't a peace offering. She was a sacrifice to christen a new battleship. Elias stood up. The cold resolve in his gut hardened into something unbreakable. Maury, prep the medbay, he said. Are you injured? No, Elias said. But someone is about to be. The extraction began at the hour of the weeping sun, a daily religious observance where the artificial gravity of the city was lowered by 20% to encourage spiritual reflection. The guards were distracted, their movements floaty and slow. Elias approached the detention block. He was not sneaking this time. He was walking fast, flanked by 2 floating medical gurneys piloted by Maury's remote subroutines. He wore a hazard suit, his face obscured by a rebreather mask. Halt! The guard at the gate shouted. No entry during prayer. Elias held up a datapad flashing with high-priority crimson alerts. Biohazard containment, he shouted, his voice distorted. We have a confirmed outbreak of Krellian rot in the lower waste levels. It's airborne. It's moving into the ventilation system of this block. The guard hesitated. Krellian rot was a flesh-eating nightmare that scared even the bravest shock trooper. We have no orders. Do you want your skin to melt off your bones, soldier? Elias barked. I am here to evacuate the high-value prisoner before she gets infected and dies before her execution. If she dies of disease, the Emperor will skin you alive. Open the gate! Fear and bureaucracy were a potent mix. The guard swiped his access card. The force field dropped. Elias sprinted down the hall, the gurneys humming behind him. He reached Lyra's cell. She was standing by the door, exactly as he had told her. Open it, Elias commanded the guard following him. The guard complied. Elias stepped in. Lyra looked at the hazard suit, her eyes wide. Captain, don't talk, Elias said. He pulled a syringe from his belt. It contained a paralytic agent mixed with a metabolic dampener. It would mimic death for exactly 1 hour. Trust me, he whispered. He injected her neck. Lyra gasped. Her eyes locked onto his, searching for betrayal, but she found only intensity. Her knees buckled. Elias caught her. He laid her on the gurney. "She is already showing symptoms," Elias shouted at the guard. "Look at the pallor. We need to get her to the quarantine isolation unit on the dock." The guard backed away, terrified of the invisible plague. "Go!" the guard yelled. "Get her out." Elias ran. He pushed the gurney, his boots pounding the floor. He moved through the corridors, shouting warnings to clear the path. The chaos he created was a wave of panic that pushed people out of his way. He reached the lift. He punched the button for the hangar deck. As the doors closed, he ripped off the mask. He was sweating profuse. "Maury, status on the Aegis? Engines are hot. Captain. However, we have a problem." "What problem?" "Ambassador Sterling just authorized a launch clamp on our landing gear. He knows. Can you override it?" "I am an advanced military AI. Captain, I can override a toaster, but it will take 30 seconds, and during those 30 seconds, we will be a sitting duck." Elias looked down at Lyra. She was pale, her breathing shallow, her consciousness drifting in the chemically induced void. 30 seconds, Elias said. "We can do 30 seconds. The hangar deck was a cavern of activity. Terran shuttles were prepping for departure. Aurelian fighters were patrolling the opening. Elias burst out of the lift, pushing the gurney. The Aegis sat on Pad 4, a sleek black Corvette that looked like a knife blade. He was halfway to the ramp when the sirens started. Not the biohazard sirens. The intrusion sirens. "Stop him!" A voice amplified over the speakers boomed. It was Sterling. Terran security personnel poured out of the diplomatic office. Aurelian guards, confused but reacting to the noise, raised their weapons. Elias drew his sidearm. "Maury, drop the ramp." The ramp of the Aegis hissed open. Elias didn't stop running. He fired 2 warning shots into the fuel lines overhead. Sparks showered down, creating a wall of fire and smoke that cut off the line of sight for the shooters. He hit the ramp, his boots sliding on the metal. He shoved the gurney up into the cargo hold. Laser fire stitched the air around him. A bolt grazed his shoulder, searing the armor, biting into flesh. Elias grunted but didn't fall. He hit the retraction button. As the ramp closed, he saw Ambassador Sterling standing on the observation deck, looking down with a face of pure hatred. Elias gave him a salute, not the military kind, but a gesture far older and far ruder. The ramp sealed. Elias collapsed next to the gurney. "Maury, get us out of here." Clamps released. Maury announced. "Shields up. Absorbing fire. Brace for high G maneuver." The Aegis roared. The ship didn't just lift, it leaped. The inertial dampeners whined as Maury pushed the engines to 110% on the view screen. Seraph Spire fell away, a jewel of light receding into the clouds. Flak burst around them. The Aurelian defense grid was waking up, targeting computers locking on, Maury said. "We have 3 interceptors on our tail. Plot a jump," Elias rasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "We are still in the atmosphere. Captain, a jump now will likely tear the hull plating off. Do it. I, charging drive. 5, 4. Elias looked at Lyra. She was still unconscious, peaceful amidst the violence shaking the ship. 3, 2, 1. The stars outside the viewport stretched into long, impossible lines. A boom resonated through the hull, a sound like the universe tearing open. Then, silence. The roar of the engine smoothed into the deep, rhythmic thrum of hyperspace. Elias leaned his head back against the bulkhead. He checked the ship's status. The hull integrity was at 80%. They were alive. Maury's voice came over the internal comms, softer now. "Captain, I have intercepted a general broadcast from the Imperial Spire. Play it, Elias said. The voice of the High Chancellor filled the cargo hold. By the order of the throne, Captain Elias Kane is hereby declared an enemy of the Empire. He has abducted the traitor Lyra Vile. A bounty of 50 million credits is placed on his head. He is to be killed on sight. Elias listened to the words. He looked at the bounty. 50 million. It was a lot of money. He looked at Lyra, sleeping on the gurney, the woman who knew the code to dismantle a tyranny, the woman he had just thrown his entire life away for. He stood up, wincing as his shoulder throbbed. He walked over to her and gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. We are in trouble. Maury, Elias said. Statistically, yes, the AI replied, but on the bright side, you are no longer bored. Elias smirked. It was a grim, tired expression, but it was real. No, he said. I definitely am not. He walked to the medbay cabinet to find a bandage for his shoulder. They were outlaws now. They had no backup, no country, and half the galaxy wanted them dead. But for the first time in 20 years, Elias Kane felt clean. The holoscreen in the mess hall of the Aegis flickered with the manic energy of a galaxy on the brink of war. The traitor bride and her Terran abductor remain at large. The news anchor announced. Her skin was dyed the patriotic violet of the Aurelian court, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. Sources confirm that Captain Elias Kane, a rogue agent of the Coalition, kidnapped Lady Vale moments before her execution. The Empire has formally declared this an act of war. The image shifted. It showed a grainy, manipulated photo of Elias dragging Lyra onto the ship. They had edited the lighting to make Elias look monstrous. His features twisted into a snarl, while Lyra looked limp and helpless, a victim rather than a co-conspirator. Elias Kane turned the screen off. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy, filled only by the thrum of the hyperspace drive and the metallic taste of recycled air. They are good, Elias said. He leaned against the bulkhead, his arms crossed over his chest, favoring his injured shoulder. In 12 hours, they have turned a rescue into an abduction and a political scapegoat into a martyr. Lyra sat at the small metal table, staring at her hands. She was still wearing the tattered remains of the medical gown from the escape. The neural suppression collar was gone, cut off by Elias an hour ago. But the tracking sigils, bioluminescent tattoos embedded deep in her dermis, still glowed faintly beneath her skin at the base of her neck and wrists. They are not just good, Lyra said softly. They are efficient. They do not need the truth. They only need a story that justifies the fleet launch. She looked up at him. Her eyes were dark, exhausted but clear. We are flying blind, Elias. As long as I have these sigils, they can track us the moment we drop out of hyperspace. I know, Elias said. That is why we are not going to a Coalition safe house. We are going to Kestrel Drift. Lyra stiffened. Kestrel Drift was a legend in the darker corners of the galaxy. A graveyard of old ships and older morals. A system where the trade laws of the Empire and the Coalition dissolved into a chaotic free market of vice. That is a pirate haven, she said. It is a place where people don't ask questions if the credit chit clears, Elias corrected. I know a surgeon there. He is not clean, and he is certainly not legal, but he can cut the Empire out of your skin without killing you. The Aegis dropped out of hyperspace into the smog-choked orbit of Kestrel Prime. The planet looked like a rusted ball bearing floating in oil. The orbital traffic was a nightmare of salvage tugs, smuggling freighters, and unauthorized mining drones. Maury guided them into a docking bay that smelled of ozone and rotting kelp. Welcome to Kestrel Drift, the AI announced. The current probability of being mugged within 10 meters of the airlock is 43%. The probability of contracting a tetanus infection is 99%. Enjoy your stay. Elias ignored the commentary. He checked his weapons. He handed Lyra a heavy cloak. "Keep your head down," he said. "Cover your face. If anyone speaks to you, do not answer." They moved through the corridors of the station. It was a neon-drenched labyrinth. Species from a dozen worlds mingled in the cramped alleyways. Multi-armed mechanics welding hull plates. Reptilian traders selling canisters of volatile gas. And humans with cybernetic eyes scanning for marks. The surgeon's clinic was located in the back of a repurposed engine turbine. The sign above the door simply read, "Repairs." The surgeon was a creature of indeterminate species, draped in layers of sterile plastic. He had 6 manipulator arms extending from a harness on his back, each tipping with a scalpel or a laser cauterizer. "It will cost you 10,000 credits, the surgeon rasped. His voice was synthesized, coming from a box on his chest. "Up front." Elias transferred the funds without a word. "Get on the table," the surgeon told Lyra. The room was cold. The light was harsh, humming with the frequency of the sterilization fields. Lyra removed the cloak. She hesitated, then lowered the top of her gown, exposing her neck and shoulders. The tracking sigils pulsed with a soft, rhythmic blue light. They were beautiful, intricate geometric patterns that marked her as property of the imperial throne. "This will hurt," the surgeon said. "These are bonded to the nerve clusters." "I can take it," Lyra said. Elias stepped forward. "I am staying," he said. The surgeon shrugged one of his many shoulders. "Suit yourself. Hold her down. If she flinches, I might sever a motor nerve." Elias moved to the head of the table. He did not look at the surgeon. He looked at Lyra. "Look at me," he said. Lyra looked up. Her face was pale, her jaw set tight. The surgeon activated a laser scalpel. The sound was a high-pitched whine. As the laser touched her skin, Lyra arched her back, a gasp tearing from her throat. It was not just pain, it was a violation. The sigils were designed to punish any attempt at removal. It felt like fire was being poured into her veins. Elias gripped her shoulders. His hands were large, warm, and steady. "Breathe," he ordered gently. "Stay with me. Lyra, just breathe." The smell of burning ozone and singed flesh filled the small room. Lyra squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking out. She felt exposed, stripped of her armor. Her dignity flayed open under the harsh lights of a criminal's den. Elias did not look away. He did not flinch at the sight of her blood. He leaned closer, his voice a low rumble near her ear, drowning out the whine of the laser. "You are doing good," he said. "Almost done. You are stronger than this pain." He wasn't holding her down like a prisoner. He was anchoring her. His thumbs brushed the hollows of her collarbones, a touch that was shockingly tender amidst the violence of the surgery. Lyra opened her eyes and locked onto his. In the gray depths of his iris, she saw something she had never seen in the eyes of the princes or priests who had owned her. She saw respect. She saw a shared endurance. The surgeon worked with mechanical indifference. "Last one," the surgeon muttered. The laser cut deep. Lyra cried out, her hand flying up to grip Elias's forearm. She dug her nails into his skin, desperate for something real to hold on to. Elias didn't pull away. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers, squeezing back with equal force. "I have you," he whispered. "I have got you." The final sigil flickered and died. The surgeon wiped the blood away and applied a rapid healing gel that stung like ice. "Done," the surgeon said. "You are a ghost now. Girl, the Empire cannot see you." Lyra lay trembling on the table. her breath coming in ragged hitches. The physical pain was fading, replaced by a strange, hollow lightness. The marks of her condemnation were gone. Elias helped her sit up. He kept his hand on her back, supporting her weight. "Can you walk?" he asked. Lyra nodded. She pulled the gown up, covering the fresh, angry scars. She looked at Elias, at the blood on his arm where her nails had broken the skin. "I hurt you," she said. Elias looked at the scratches. He wiped a smudge of blood away with his thumb. "I have had worse," he said. "Come on. Let us get back to the ship." The Aegis felt smaller when they returned. The adrenaline of the escape and the surgery had burned off, leaving behind a raw, vibrating tension that filled the cockpit. They were in deep space now, drifting in the shadow of a nebula to mask their thermal signature. The ship was quiet, save for the hum of the life support. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's chair, staring out at the violet clouds of the nebula. She felt raw. The surgery had stripped away more than just the trackers. It had stripped away the barrier between them. Elias was at the navigation console, running diagnostics. He moved with a restless energy, checking screens that didn't need checking. "You should sleep," he said, not turning around. "I cannot sleep," Lyra said. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the drone explosion. I see the way the Chancellor smiled." Elias turned. The cockpit was dim, lit only by the instrument panels. The shadows cut sharp angles across his face. He smiled because he won. Elias said, "He got his war." "Not yet," Lyra said. She stood up. Her legs were shaky, but she forced them to hold. She walked over to him. "We have the data shard." Elias looked down at her. The space between them seemed to shrink, charged with a magnetic pull that was terrifying and undeniable. They were two soldiers from opposing sides, stranded in the dark, bound by a crime that carried a death sentence. "The shard is encrypted," Elias said. His voice was rougher than usual. "Maury has been running brute force algorithms on it for 6 hours. Nothing. Let me see it," Lyra said. Elias hesitated. He looked at her throat, where the bandages covered the fresh scars. "You need to rest." "Lyra, I need to be useful," she countered. "I am tired of being the package you are smuggling." "Let me see the shard." Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out the fractured data crystal. He held it out. Lyra reached for it. Her fingers brushed his palm. The contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with pain. She looked up, startled, and found Elias watching her mouth. The air in the cockpit grew thin. The silence stretched, heavy with the things they couldn't say. "I am afraid. I am grateful. I want you." Elias took a half step closer. His hand, the one not holding the shard, hovered near her waist, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Lyra," he murmured. Suddenly, the speakers blared with a jarring, upbeat synth-pop ballad about a robot falling in love with a toaster. "Oh, my circuits burn for your slotted heart," the singer crooned. Elias jumped back, the moment shattering like glass. Lyra blinked, her face flushing hot. "Maury!" Elias roared. "I apologize, Captain." The AI's voice was the picture of innocence. "I was running a background diagnostic on the audio systems and my fingers slipped. Metaphorically speaking, I do not have fingers. Also, just for your information, the probability of a romantic interaction in this cockpit has risen to 88%. I thought some mood music might assist the transition." "Turn it off," Elias growled. "Music deactivated," Maury said. "Would you prefer a lecture on workplace harassment protocols?" Elias rubbed his face with his hands. Lyra let out a breathy laugh. It broke the tension. but the underlying current remained, a live wire humming under the floorboards. "Give me the shard." "Elias," Lyra said, stepping back to the safety of professionalism. He handed it to her. Lyra walked to the science station. She placed the shard on the scanner pad. "It's not a standard encryption," she said, studying the holographic readout. "The code structure is biological. It mimics DNA sequencing." She placed her hand on the interface. "It needs a genetic key," she whispered. She pricked her finger on a stylus and pressed the drop of blood against the sensor. The room exploded with light. The data shard spun, projecting a massive, complex star map into the air above them. It wasn't just a map. It was a simulation. Elias stepped up beside her, his eyes wide. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra's hands flew across the controls. She knew this code. She had studied the theory of it in the archives of her father's library. Before the purge. "It is bioluminal cryptography," she said. "It is an ancient Aurelian governance code. Only the high families had access to it. This shard, it wasn't just stolen, it was prepared." The map zoomed in on a specific sector, a civilian orbital habitat, target, Haven Ring, projected casualties 4 million, Operation False Flag, asset, Meridian Syndicate. Elias swore softly. "Haven Ring," he said. "That is a neutral habitat. It houses refugees from the last war, mostly children. If they strike it," Lyra said, her voice trembling, "they will frame the Terran coalition. It will be the atrocity that justifies total annihilation. There will be no armistice, no treaties, just genocide." Elias leaned in, studying the data. "There is a timestamp," he said. 5 days. We have 5 days to stop it." But there was something else. The map was reacting to Lyra's presence. The light swirled around her, forming symbols in the air, symbols of authority, of command. Elias looked at her. "Why does the computer recognize you?" he asked. Lyra stared at the symbols. A memory surfaced. Her mother, giving her the wedding necklace, whispering that it was more than just jewelry. "Because I am not just a bride," Lyra realized. She touched the necklace at her throat. "My bloodline. The Vile family wasn't just noble. We were the keepers of the writ, the old laws that limit the Emperor's power." She looked at Elias. "This shard is only half the key," she said. "The other half, the decoder, is in my necklace, but I cannot unlock it here. I need a resonance chamber." "Where?" Elias asked. "The moon of Nemos," Lyra said. "The derelict library. It is a dead world, abandoned centuries ago, but the archives are alive. They respond to memory." Elias nodded. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask if it was safe. "Maury, set a course for Nemos," he ordered. "Maximum burn." The moon of Nemos was a gray, silent sphere orbiting a dying gas giant. The surface was covered in ruins, great stone towers that spiraled into the sky, covered in moss that glowed with a faint, ghostly phosphorescence. They landed the Aegis in a courtyard overgrown with crystal vines. The air was breathable but thin, smelling of old paper and ozone. Elias and Lyra walked into the main archive. It was a cathedral of data. The walls were lined with millions of crystalline rods, each one holding a history, a law, a memory. "It is quiet," Elias said, his voice echoing. "Too quiet," Lyra replied. She led him to the center of the chamber, where a single podium stood. She unclasped her necklace, the heavy platinum chain with the star sapphire pendant. She placed it on the podium. The room woke up. A hum started in the floor, vibrating up through their boots. The crystal rods on the walls lit up, cascading light in a wave that rushed toward the center. The light hit the pendant, and the sapphire split open. A hologram projected outward. It was a voice recording. Lyra, a woman's voice, spoke. It was soft, hurried. If you are hearing this, then I have failed to protect you. The Emperor plans to break the covenant. He will use your marriage to start a war that will burn the galaxy. You are the key, my daughter. The Vial blood carries the override. You can stop the fleets. You can rewrite the command. The message ended. The star map from the shard merged with the light from the necklace. A new set of coordinates appeared. Not a target, but a source. Elias looked at Lyra. She was staring at the hologram of her mother, tears streaming silently down her face. Your family knew, Elias said. They were trying to stop it. They were murdered for it, Lyra whispered. And they sold me to the people who killed them. She looked at the map. She looked at the command codes scrolling in the air. Codes that could freeze a fleet. Codes that could ground an armada. She turned to Elias. Her face was no longer the face of a victim. It was the face of a woman who had just realized she held a weapon. She took a step toward him, her voice trembling with a fierce, sudden defiance. I thought I was nothing, she said. I thought I was currency. She looked at the glowing map, then back to his eyes. I was a doomed alien bride marked for execution until a human captain rewrote my end. Elias stared at her. In that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, he fell in love with her. Not the idea of her, not the mission, but her. We are going to finish this. Lyra, he said, we are going to crash. The roof of the library shattered. Debris rained down. A dropship roared overhead, its engines screaming. Ropes descended. Figures in black combat armor rappelled down. They wore masks that looked like featureless chrome skulls. Syndicate! Elias shouted. He tackled Lyra, shoving her behind the podium just as the floor where she had been standing disintegrated under a hail of plasma fire. Secure the asset! A mechanical voice boomed. Kill the human! Elias popped up and fired his rifle, and he took one down, the round punching through the chest plate. But there were 12 of them. They were pinned. We can't fight them head on. Elias yelled over the roar of weapons. Use the library, Lyra shouted. She reached up and slammed her hand onto the podium controls. Archive retrieval. Sector 4, she commanded. The room responded. Massive mechanical arms, used for retrieving the data crystals high on the walls, swung down with terrifying speed. They were heavy, made of bronze and iron. One of the arms swept through the syndicate squad like a scythe. 3 attackers were knocked flying, smashing into the stone pillars. Elias used the distraction. He tossed a gravity grenade. It detonated near the entrance, creating a localized singularity that sucked the debris and 2 more soldiers into a crushing vortex. Move! Elias shouted. They ran. They sprinted through the aisles of the library, dodging plasma bolts that turned the ancient crystals into shrapnel. Lyra pointed to a maintenance shaft. There. They slid into the chute just as a rocket exploded against the wall behind them. They tumbled down a dark slide, landing in a heap in the lower catacombs. Elias groaned, rolling over. Everyone wants you dead, he wheezed. It is very becoming. Lyra helped him up. She was clutching the necklace and the data drive. We have the map, she said. We have the proof, and we have the override. Elias checked his ammo counter. Low. We need to get to the ship before they lock down the airspace. They navigated the catacombs, emerging near the landing zone. The syndicate dropship was hovering over the Aegis, preparing to slag it. Maury, Elias yelled into his comms. Now would be a good time for that bad driving you are so proud of. The Aegis's dorsal turret spun around. It didn't fire at the dropship. It fired at the crystal overhang above the courtyard. The cliff face sheared off. Tons of rock crashed down onto the syndicate ship, smashing it into the ground. Elias and Lyra sprinted for the ramp. They scrambled aboard as the dust cloud swallowed the ruins. "Punch it!" Elias yelled. The Aegis shot into the sky, leaving the broken moon behind, safe in hyperspace. The mood was somber. They sat in the briefing room, looking at the complete picture. "The Syndicate is going to strike Haven Ring in 4 days," Elias said. "Even with this proof, we can't broadcast it. The Empire controls the media nets. They will block the signal. We can't stop the attack from here," Lyra said. "No," Elias agreed. "But we can stop the war." "How?" Lyra pointed to the center of the map, to the Imperial capital, the Coronation Summit, she said. "All the fleet admirals, the Terran ambassadors, and the High Chancellor will be there in 3 days to crown Valerius." Elias looked at her. "Lyra, that is the most heavily guarded fortress in the galaxy. If we go there, we will be shot out of the sky before we even breach the atmosphere." "I have the override," Lyra said. "I can disable their orbital guns for 2 minutes, just enough time to land." "And then?" Elias asked. "We walk into the throne room and ask them nicely to stop?" "No," Lyra said. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "We walk into the throne room and I claim my inheritance. I force them to listen." "It is suicide," Elias said softly. "It is the only way," Lyra replied. Elias looked at the map. He looked at the woman who had transformed from a trembling bride into a revolutionary. He took a deep breath. "Mori, set a course for the Imperial capital." "Course set." "Captain," Mori said, "probability of survival is 0.04%. Never tell me the odds." "Mori," Elias said, "just play the music." As the ship turned toward the heart of the Empire, the speakers crackled to life. It wasn't a love song this time. It was a war anthem. Oryx Port was not built. It was accumulated. It was a massive, chaotic clot of metal and light drifting in the neutral zone between the Empire and the Coalition. A place where gravity was a suggestion and legality was a myth. The Aegis slid into a docking berth that smelled of sulfur and fried spices. To the naked eye, the ship was just another scarred freighter, its stealth signature dampening the sleek lines of military-grade engineering. Inside the cockpit, Captain Elias Kane checked the seal on his wrist comp. "Welcome to the drain of the galaxy," he said. "If you can buy it, sell it, or kill it, you can find it here." Lyra Vale stood beside him, looking out the viewport. The station was a kaleidoscope of species. There were crystalline entities floating in methane bubbles, hulking reptilians bargaining over crates of munitions, and swarms of cybernetic drones weaving through the hanging bazaars like silver gnats. "It is vibrant," Lyra said, her voice tight, "and it is loud. It is perfect cover." Elias replied, "We need access codes to the banking spire if we want to find out who is funding the syndicate. And I know the only man in this sector dishonest enough to have them." They disembarked, moving through the crush of the crowd. Lyra wore a heavy hooded tunic, her face obscured, but her eyes darted everywhere, analyzing the chaotic flow of the station with the precision of a scientist. She wasn't just looking, she was mapping. They found the contact in a gambling den called the Gravity Well. The floor of the club rotated slowly, shifting the centrifugal force so that drinks would occasionally drift out of glasses if the patrons weren't careful. Silas Vane was sitting at a high-stakes sabacc table, wearing a coat made of iridescent lizard skin. He was a man Elias had chased across 3 sectors during the war, a smuggler with a smile that could charm a lock open. "Kane," Silas shouted, spotting them. He didn't reach for a weapon, which was a good sign. "You look terrible. Did the Empire finally catch up with your self-righteousness?" Elias didn't smile. I need a favor. Silas. Silas laughed, tossing a handful of credits onto the table. You don't ask for favors, Kane. You demand compliance. Who is the shadow? Lyra stepped forward. She lowered her hood just enough to reveal the sharp angle of her jaw, but kept her eyes hidden. I am the one paying, she said. Silas raised an eyebrow. Detailed. I like her. What do you need? We need entry to the midnight auction, Elias said. Tonight? Silas whistled low. The midnight auction? That is high tier. Captain, warlords, slavers, and syndicate headhunters. You are looking for trouble. We are looking for a ledger, Lyra said. Silas looked between them. He saw the tension in Elias's shoulders, the way he positioned himself slightly in front of Lyra. The smuggler's grin softened into something sharper, more calculating. You are the two on the news, he whispered, the bride and the butcher. 50 million credits walking into my favorite bar. Are you going to turn us in? Elias asked, his hand drifting to his hip. Silas snorted. And ruin my reputation as a rebel? Please. Besides, the Empire owes me money. He slid a data chip across the table. These are encryption keys for a guest identity. You will need a cover. The auction scans for retinal matches. I have a cover, Lyra said. I am a void cartographer, a mapper of unstable trade routes. It explains why I would be selling data to criminals. Smart, Silas said. And you, Kane? You look too much like a cop. You will have to go as her hired muscle, her attendant. Elias frowned. I am not wearing a servant's crest. You will if you want to get through the door, Silas said. He stood up and clapped Elias on the shoulder. Try not to start a war in my city, old friend. I have rent to pay. Back on the ship, the waiting was worse than the running. The Aegis was cramped, a vessel designed for speed, not comfort. Elias and Lyra sat in the small galley, eating ration packs that tasted like salted cardboard. The lights were low to conserve power, casting the room in deep ambers and shadows. Lyra picked at her food. Do you trust him? She asked. Silas? No, Elias said. I trust his greed. As long as we are more valuable to him alive than dead, he will help us. He took a drink of water, watching her. In the dim light, the scars on her neck where the sigils had been were faint silver lines. She looked younger now, stripped of the heavy makeup and the weight of the wedding gown. She looked like someone who could have been a scientist, an explorer, if the universe hadn't decided to make her a pawn. You are good at this, Elias said. The deception, the cartographer cover, it fits you. I trained for it, Lyra said quietly. Not the deception, the science. Before the engagement, I spent years in the stellarography vaults. I wanted to map the drift. I wanted to find new stars. She looked up at him. I never wanted to rule anything. Elias, I just wanted to see what was out there. You still can, Elias said. When this is over. If we survive, she corrected. The fear in her voice was not hysterical. It was pragmatic. It was the honest fear of a soldier before the charge. It pulled at something in Elias's chest, a desire to protect her that went beyond duty. We will survive, he said. I promised you rescuer's choice. That includes the choice to live. He reached across the small metal table and covered her hand with his. Her skin was cool, her fingers trembling slightly. Lyra turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. The contact was electric, sudden and overwhelming in the small space. They stared at each other, the air leaving the room. Elias saw the gold flecks in her eyes, saw the pulse beating at the base of her throat. He leaned in. She leaned in. The distance between them vanished until he could feel the warmth of her breath on his lips. It would be so easy to close the gap, to let the terrifying adrenaline of the last week resolve into something human and soft. Then, the lights in the galley shifted. The amber emergency lighting cut out, replaced by a slow, pulsating pink glow. Soft saxophone music began to drift from the ventilation ducts. Elias froze. Lyra blinked, pulling back. "Mari," Elias said, his voice deadly calm. "What are you doing?" The AI's voice was smug. "Atmospheric adjustment. Captain, my sensors detected elevated pheromone levels and a heart rate synchronization of 99%. I initiated the luxury date mode protocol to facilitate the interaction. Would you like me to dim the lights further? Or perhaps synthesize some chocolate?" "Turn it off," Elias snapped. The pink light vanished, replaced by the harsh white glare of the standard halogen strips. The moment was gone, severed by the intrusion, but the reality of it lingered. Lyra pulled her hand away, her face flushed. "I should prepare for the auction," she said, her voice shaky. Elias nodded, looking at the table. "Right. The mission." They both stood up, moving to opposite ends of the ship, retreating not because they didn't want it, but because they were terrified that if they started, they would unravel completely. And they could not afford to unravel. The midnight auction was held in the suspended ballroom of the governor's spire, a transparent sphere hanging beneath the city, surrounded by the vacuum of space. Lyra walked in, and heads turned. She was not wearing the soft silks of a bride. She was dressed in ceremonial Aurelian flight armor, burnished copper plating over a black bodysuit, sleek and dangerous. A sensory visor covered her eyes, displaying real-time thermal data of the room. She looked like a Valkyrie of science. Elias walked 2 steps behind her. He wore the gray livery of a bondservant, his head bowed, his hands clasped. But under the loose sleeves, his muscles were coiled, and a compact pulse pistol was strapped to his forearm. The room was a masquerade of the galaxy's worst impulses. Warlords drank vintage wine while bidding on stolen planetary cores. Syndicate fixers traded assassination contracts like baseball cards. Lyra moved through the crowd with icy confidence. She approached a display of stolen data shards. "Identify the target," she whispered via the sub-vocal comms. 12 o'clock, Elias replied, his voice a ghost in her ear. "The vault entrance is behind the holographic tapestry. 2 guards. Thermal signatures suggest heavy cybernetics." Lyra nodded. She turned to a reptilian merchant blocking her path. "Move," she said, her voice distorted by the visor. The merchant hissed, "And who are you, little solid?" "I am a cartographer of the dead zone," Lyra said. "And unless you want me to map the inside of your digestive tract with a gravity spike, you will step aside." The merchant blinked, then stepped back. Lyra swept past. Elias suppressed a smile. She was learning. They reached the tapestry. It depicted the fall of the First Empire. "Distraction needed," Lyra signaled. Elias scanned the room. He saw a waiter carrying a tray of volatile, jagged glass cocktails. On it, Elias stumbled. It was a practiced, clumsy movement. He slammed into the waiter. The tray went flying. The cocktails hit the floor and exploded in a cloud of reactive vapor that smelled of burning sugar. The crowd gasped. Security drones swarmed the mess. In the confusion, Lyra sliced the lock on the tapestry. She used a multi-tool concealed in her gauntlet, bypassing the biometric scanner with a loop code Maury had written. The door slid open. They slipped inside. The vault was silent. Rows of physical ledgers and hard drives lined the walls. This was the Syndicate's brain. "Start the download," Elias said, taking up a defensive position at the door. Lyra connected her gauntlet to the main terminal. The data streamed across her visor. "I found it," she said. "The transaction logs." Her breath hitched. "What is it?" Elias asked. Lyra swiped through the files. "It is not just money, Elias. It is a payroll. Admiral Halloway of the Terran Fleet, High Priest Korath of the Aurelian Temple. They are all on the retainer." She froze on a specific file. Asset transfer. House Vial. Recipient. Lady Alara Vial. Her mother? Lyra stared at the glowing text. Her mother hadn't just known. She had been paid. The syndicate had paid off her family's debts in exchange for Lyra. "She sold me," Lyra whispered. The words felt like glass in her throat. "She didn't try to save me. She sold me to buy another year of luxury for a dying house. The hologram in the library. The warning. It was a lie, or maybe a final act of guilt. But the transaction date was 5 years ago." Lyra felt the ground tilt. Her entire life, her sense of duty, her belief that she was a tragic sacrifice, it was all manufactured. She wasn't a martyr. She was a receipt. "Lyra," Elias said. He left the door and came to her. He saw the file. He saw the devastation on her face. "It is in the blood," she said, her voice hollow. "I am made of this betrayal." "No," Elias said. He grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face him. The armor was hard under his hands, but she was trembling beneath it. "Listen to me. We do not choose where we come from. We do not choose the debts our parents sign. I am one of them. Elias, you are the woman who risked execution to save a prince who hated her." Elias said fiercely. "You are the woman who flew into a nebula to stop a war. That is not your mother's blood. That is you." He shook her gently. "Inherited sin is a myth. Lyra, character is a choice. You choose who you are right now. Are you the victim of a transaction? Or are you the one who burns the ledger?" Lyra looked at him. The visor obscured her eyes, but he felt her steady herself. She took a deep breath. She reached out and tapped the delete key on the financial transfer, then initiated the copy of the massacre coordinates. "I am the one who burns it," she said. She pulled the drive. "We have the coordinates for the Haven Ring strike. Let's go," Elias said. They turned to leave. The door slid open. Standing there was not a guard. It was Governor Thorne, the ruler of Oryx Port. He was a tall, elegant man with skin like polished obsidian. Behind him stood a squad of syndicate shock troopers. "Going somewhere?" Thorne asked smoothly. "We have the evidence, Thorne," Elias said, raising his hand slowly. "The Empire will not look kindly on a neutral governor funding terrorists." "The Empire pays well," Thorne said, "but the syndicate pays better, and they are very eager to close the loop on the doomed bride." He gestured to the troopers. "Kill the spare. Bring me the girl." Elias moved faster than thought. He kicked the heavy metal table in the center of the room, flipping it onto its side as a makeshift shield. "Down!" he yelled. Plasma fire erupted, searing the air. Lyra returned fire with a wrist-mounted stunner she had hidden in the armor. It wasn't enough. "We need an exit," she shouted. Elias looked at the wall behind the vault. It was made of reinforced glass, looking out into the vacuum of the shipping lanes. "Can your suit handle hard vacuum?" Elias asked. "Yes." "Mine can't," Elias said grimly. "But I can hold my breath." He pulled a demolition charge from his belt and slapped it against the glass. "Hold on." He blew the charge. The sound was not a boom. It was a sudden, violent silence as the air was ripped out of the room. The glass shattered outward. Elias and Lyra were sucked into the void. Oryx Port was a maze of zero-gravity canals. tubes of water suspended in magnetic fields that wound through the vacuum, allowing aquatic species to travel between spires. Elias and Lyra tumbled into one of the open water lanes. The shock of the cold water hit Elias like a hammer. He kicked, his lungs burning, the water churning around him. Lyra was beside him, her armor's thrusters firing, stabilizing her. She grabbed him. "I have you!" Her voice came through his earpiece. They were flying through a river in space, above and below them. The stars spun. Behind them, Syndicate aquatic drones splashed into the canal, their propellers whining. "They are gaining!" Lyra shouted. Elias pulled his rebreather mask from his pocket and jammed it over his face. He drew his pulse pistol. The water slowed the bolts, turning them into streaks of boiling steam. "Aim for the magnetic containment rings," Elias yelled. "If we break the rings, the water disperses into vacuum." Lyra argued. "Exactly." Lyra understood. She aimed her gauntlet. She fired a concentrated sonic blast at the magnetic generator holding the canal together ahead of the drones. The ring shattered. Physics took over. The water in the canal behind them lost its cohesion. It exploded outward into the vacuum, turning instantly into a cloud of ice crystals. The Syndicate drones were caught in the flash freeze, their engines clogged with ice, their hulls cracking under the sudden pressure shift. They spun away, dead in space. Elias and Lyra rode the momentum of the remaining water stream until they hit the airlock of the docking bay. They crashed onto the deck, wet, freezing, and gasping for air. Elias ripped off his mask, coughing water. Lyra scrambled up. She punched the override on the airlock, sealing it just as the station's security alarms began to scream. "We have the data," she gasped, holding up the drive. "We have the proof." Elias looked at her. Her hair was plastered to her face, her armor scuffed, her eyes wild with the thrill of survival. "You are a terrible cartographer," he wheezed, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. "You destroyed the map." Lyra laughed. It was a breathless, jagged sound, but it was full of life. "I am rewriting it," she said. "They ran for the Aegis. The station was waking up, the governor's forces closing in. But they had the truth. And for the first time, Lyra Vile knew exactly who she was. She wasn't a daughter of a traitor. She wasn't a bride. She was the storm that was coming for them all. The Haven Ring was not a fortress. It was a spinning wheel of glass and hydroponic gardens, a fragile bubble of life suspended against the black velvet of deep space. It was a civilian habitat, home to 4 million refugees who had fled the border skirmishes, believing they had found a sanctuary where the politics of the Empire and the Coalition could not reach them. They were wrong. The Aegis dropped out of hyperspace on the dark side of the habitat's moon, masking its thermal signature in the shadow of the cratered rock. The ship hummed with the tension of a weapon drawn back and held ready to fire. In the ready room, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and the subtle metallic tang of fear. Lyra Vile stood by the weapon locker, fastening the clasps of her borrowed combat armor. It was Terran gear, heavier and less elegant than the Aurelian ceremonial plate she had worn on Oryx, but it felt solid. It felt like survival. Elias Kane stood behind her. He reached out, his hands hovering for a split second before resting on her shoulders to help adjust the back plating. "The seal is tight," he said. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated through the composite material of her suit. Lyra turned to face him. The ready room was small, forcing them into a proximity that made the air between them feel charged, electric. Elias looked tired. The bruising from the canal chase on Oryx had faded to a sickly yellow, and the lines around his eyes were etched deep by sleeplessness. But his gaze was steady, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. We are dropping into a kill zone. Lyra, he said. I know, she replied. Elias stepped closer. He did not grab her. He did not try to stop her. He simply occupied the space, a wall of protective gravity that she could choose to lean on or step away from. If the Syndicate launches the attack before we can disable their command ship, the crossfire will be absolute, he said. I need you to understand the probability. We might die, Lyra said. She said it simply, without the tremor she expected. We might die, Elias agreed. He looked at her hands, which were trembling slightly despite her calm voice. He reached out and took them, his thumbs running over the knuckles. It was not a gesture of ownership. It was a question. Lyra looked up at him, in the harsh light of the ready room, stripped of titles and protocols. There was no captain and no bride. There were just two people standing on the edge of a cliff. I have spent my life being told who I am, Lyra whispered. I was a daughter, then a wife, then a traitor. I was always something to be used. She tightened her grip on his hands. With you, I am just Lyra. Elias exhaled, a sound that was half sigh, half prayer. He lifted her hands, pressing his forehead against her fingers for a brief, reverent moment. You are the bravest person I have ever known, he said. He straightened, his gray eyes searching hers. I do not want to lose you, Lyra, but I will not keep you in a cage to save you. Lyra released one of his hands and reached up, cupping his jaw. The stubble was rough against her palm. She traced the line of the scar through his eyebrow. Then do not say goodbye, she said. Elias leaned into her touch. He turned his head slightly, pressing a kiss to the center of her palm. It was a gesture of profound intimacy, far more exposing than the desperate grappling of their escape. I would not dare, he murmured. They stood there for a heartbeat longer, the silence stretching between them, a silent vow exchanged in the quiet dark. If they burned, they would burn together. If they lived, everything would change. Maury's voice cut through the air, lacking its usual sarcasm. Captain, Lady Vale, we are receiving encrypted pings from the Habitat defense grid. We have 5 minutes until the Syndicate's projected strike window. The moment broke, but the connection remained. Elias stepped back, his face hardening into the mask of the soldier, but his eyes remained warm. Let us go rewrite a legend, he said. The bridge of the Aegis was a flurry of activity. Elias took the pilot's chair, strapping in. Lyra took the ops station, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. We have a connection to the local militia leader, Maury announced, patching him through. A grainy image appeared on the main screen. Captain Vance of the Haven Guard looked exhausted, his uniform unbuttoned at the collar, sweat gleaming on his forehead. Who is this? Vance barked. We are tracking an unauthorized corvette in our shadow. Identify or be targeted. This is Captain Elias Kane of the Terran Coalition, Elias said, and I am sending you a data packet. Read it. Fast. Vance looked down at his console. His eyes widened as he scanned the Syndicate battle plans and the evacuation coordinates Lyra had stolen. This says they are going to hit the primary reactor, Vance stammered. They want to drop the ring out of orbit. They want a massacre, Elias said. Captain Vance, listen to me. You need to scramble every interceptor you have. Do not wait for them to decloak. Fire on the coordinates I am sending you now. You want me to fire on empty space? Vance asked. Lyra stepped into the frame. She pulled back her hood. You are not firing on empty space, Captain, she said, her voice ringing with the imperial cadence she had been trained to use. You are firing on the enemies of peace. Vance stared. Lady Vale? The traitor? I am the only one trying to save your people, Lyra said. Do it. Vance hesitated for a second, then nodded. All wings. Fire on the provided coordinates. On the tactical display, Lyra saw the Haven militia fighters, mining skiffs retrofitted with lasers and old patrol craft, launched from the habitat. They poured fire into the empty void at Sector 4. The void screamed back. Shields shimmered into existence as the Syndicate fleet was forced to decloak under the barrage. 3 heavy frigates and a massive command carrier materialized, their hulls painted a matte, light-absorbing black. "They are early," Elias shouted. "Shields up! Maury, get us in the fight!" The Aegis surged forward, engines roaring. The battle for Haven Ring began not with a speech, but with a chaotic eruption of plasma fire. The civilian habitat loomed large in the viewport, a fragile ring of light. The Syndicate ships ignored the militia. They focused their heavy cannons on the station's structural pylons. "They are trying to cut the gravity tethers," Lyra said, reading the energy spikes. "If those pylons break, the station tears itself apart. I am drawing their fire," Elias gritted out. He threw the Aegis into a corkscrew maneuver, dodging a lance of green energy that would have vaporized them. He keyed the comms. "This is the Aegis broadcasting on all frequencies. The attack on Haven Ring is a false flag operation conducted by the Meridian Syndicate." "Jamming detected," Maury reported. "They are drowning us out with white noise." Lyra looked at the sensor readings. The Syndicate command carrier, the Leviathan, was sitting in the rear of the formation, protected by the frigates. It was a fortress of antennas and dishes. "That ship is the source of the jamming," Lyra said. "And it is coordinating the drone swarms attacking the pylons." "We have to take it out," Elias said. "No," Lyra corrected. "We have to board it." Elias looked at her. "The proof we need is in their databanks," Lyra said fast. "The link to the Imperial ministers. The final piece of the puzzle. If we just blow it up, the evidence burns with it, and the war happens anyway." "It is a fortress," Elias argued, banking the ship hard to avoid a missile lock. "It is an Aurelian design," Lyra said. "I know the airlock codes. I can get in." Elias didn't waste time arguing. He trusted her. "Maury, plot an intercept course for the Leviathan. We are going to play a game of chicken." The Aegis dove into the heart of the crossfire. Elias flew like a madman, skimming the hull of a Syndicate frigate to confuse their targeting computers. Explosions blossomed around them, silent flowers of destruction in the vacuum. "Get ready for the jump," Elias shouted. He brought the Corvette alongside the massive carrier, matching its velocity. The Aegis shuddered as its docking clamps latched onto the enemy hull. "Go!" Elias yelled. "I will hold them off." Lyra didn't look back. She ran to the airlock. She put on her helmet, the seal hissing shut. The airlock cycled. She stepped out into the vacuum, magnetizing her boots to the hull of the Leviathan. Below her, the battle raged, a swirl of laser fire and debris. She scrambled toward the emergency maintenance hatch. She keyed in the sequence. 3, 9, Alpha, Zenith, an old code from before her time, but the Empire never changed its base architecture. The hatch spun open. Lyra dropped inside. The interior of the Leviathan was a maze of red emergency lights and screaming klaxons. Lyra moved through the corridors, her pulse pistol raised. She was not a soldier, but she was desperate, and desperation was a powerful instructor. She encountered a pair of Syndicate guards near the server room. They were surprised to see a lone woman in mismatched armor storming their ship. Lyra didn't hesitate. She fired twice. The stun bolts took them down before they could raise their rifles. She reached the server room. The door was locked with a heavy blast shield. Lyra holstered her weapon and placed her hands on the interface panel. She didn't try to hack it. She used her bioluminal training. She concentrated, manipulating the faint electrical currents in her own skin to interface with the biometric scanner. Authorize, she thought, projecting the command with every ounce of will she possessed. I am Lyra Vile of the High House. Open. The scanner flashed green. The door hissed open. Inside, rows of server banks hummed. Lyra ran to the main terminal. She jacked in her data drive. Maury, are you receiving? She asked over the comms. Signal is weak, Lady Vale, but I am copying. The AI replied. I am downloading the communication logs now. Oh, this is juicy. I see direct wire transfers from the Imperial Chancellor's personal account. Hurry, Lyra urged. Suddenly, the ship shook violently. The Leviathan was taking fire. On the bridge of the Aegis, Elias was fighting for his life. The Syndicate frigates had realized the corvette was docked and were pounding it. Shields at 20%, Maury warned. Captain, structural failure is imminent. Just a little longer. Elias gritted out. Then, the radar pinged. A massive energy signature appeared on the edge of the system. Reinforcements, Elias asked. A fleet of warships dropped out of warp. They were sharp, angular, and painted in the slate gray of the Terran coalition. Terran Navy, Maury announced. It is the Fifth Fleet, Admiral Halloway's flagship, the Indomitable. Elias felt a surge of relief that instantly turned to ice. Halloway, the name from the ledger. This is Admiral Halloway to all vessels, a voice boomed over the open channel. Cease fire immediately. The coalition is assuming control of this sector. The Syndicate ships stopped firing. They didn't run. They simply held position. Aegis, this is Halloway, the Admiral continued. We have secured the perimeter. Detach from the enemy vessel and surrender the passenger Lyra Vile to my custody immediately. Elias stared at the comm screen. Halloway's face was calm, paternal, and utterly corrupt. She is not a prisoner. Admiral, Elias said. She is a whistleblower. We have evidence that this attack was staged. We will review the evidence in a secure facility, Halloway said smoothly. Send her over. Captain, that is an order. Elias looked at the sensor board. The Indomitable was locking its tractor beams onto the Aegis. They weren't here to help. They were here to clean up the loose ends. Lyra, do you hear this? Elias asked. I hear him. Lyra's voice came back, breathless. I have the data. I am coming back. Do not come back to the ship, Elias said. He will seize you the moment you step on board. Then what do we do? Elias took a deep breath. He looked at the massive Terran dreadnought filling his view. He had spent 20 years serving that flag. He had bled for it. But the man wearing the stars was a traitor. Elias keyed the general broadcast. He opened a channel not just to the Admiral, but to the Haven Ring, the militia, and every civilian receiver in the sector. Admiral Halloway, this is Captain Elias Kane. I am refusing your order. A pause. The silence was heavier than the vacuum outside. You are skirting the edge of treason. Kane, Halloway said, his voice dropping an octave. Stand down. No, Elias said. His voice was calm, amplified across 1,000 miles of space. I served the coalition because I believed it stood for protection. But you are not protecting these people. You are trading them for a profit margin. He flipped the switches on his console, arming his remaining torpedoes. I am an officer of the Terran Navy, Elias declared, and I am relieving you of command for conspiracy to commit mass murder. Kane, you are insane, Halloway spat. You are one damaged corvette against a fleet. I am not alone, Elias said. Lyra, now. In the server room of the Leviathan, Lyra Vile stood before the glowing core of the enemy ship. She heard Elias's defiance, It filled her with a terrifying pride. She didn't run back to the airlock. She turned to the ship's primary communication array. She placed her hands on the bioluminal interface. She didn't just need to download data anymore. She needed to speak. She closed her eyes and reached into the deep memory of her blood, to the code her mother had died to protect, the governance protocol. It wasn't just a password. It was a royal decree written in light. "Override," she whispered. Her skin began to glow. The bioluminescent patterns that had been hidden since the surgery flared to life, not as slave markings, but as conduits. The light poured from her hands into the console. "This is Lyra Vile," she spoke, and her voice was carried by the Leviathan's massive transmitters, boosting the signal across the entire system. "I invoke the right of suspension." The signal hit the Syndicate ships first. The Aurelian technology at their core recognized the command. It was an ancient backdoor, a kill switch designed by the emperors to prevent rebellion. The lights on the Leviathan died. The gravity failed. The engines cut out. Across the battlefield, the Syndicate frigates powered down, drifting helplessly. But Lyra didn't stop there. She pushed the signal into the Terran frequencies, piggybacking on the Syndicate's jamming equipment which she had just hijacked. "Admiral Holloway is a traitor to the peace." Lyra's voice rang out, clear and undeniable. "Here is the price of his loyalty." She uploaded the ledger, every screen in the sector, on the Indomitable, on the Haven Ring, on the news drones hovering at the edge of the battle, lit up with the transaction logs, the millions of credits transferred. The assassination orders signed by Holloway and the Aurelian Chancellor. On the bridge of the Indomitable, chaos erupted. "Sir, we are losing helm control," an ensign shouted. "The crew is seeing the data. Mutiny on decks 4 and 5. Holloway's face went pale on the view screen. "Cut the feed," he screamed. "Blow that ship out of the sky." "We can't." "Sir, weapons control is locked out. The AI is refusing to fire on a civilian protector." Elias watched the Indomitable drift, its formation breaking as confused captains in the escort ships questioned their orders. He exhaled, his hands shaking on the controls. "Lyra," he said, "you did it." On the Leviathan, floating in zero gravity in the dark server room, Lyra slumped against the console. The glow faded from her skin. She was exhausted, drained to her marrow. "Come get me." "Elias," she whispered. The extraction was tense, but the battle was over. The Syndicate ships were dead in the water, their crews trapped in metal coffins. The Terran fleet was in disarray, with Holloway being placed under arrest by his own executive officer. Elias docked the Aegis properly this time. He stormed the airlock, moving through the dark corridors of the silent carrier until he found the server room. Lyra was floating near the ceiling, unconscious. He pushed off the wall, drifting up to her. He caught her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "I have you," he said, his voice cracking. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at him, then at the dead console. "Did we win?" she asked weakly. Elias looked at her face, smudged with grease and sweat, beautiful and fierce. "We stopped the war," he said. He pulled her toward the exit, towing her back to the safety of their ship. The aftermath was a political hurricane. The Aegis sat on the landing pad of Haven Ring, surrounded by cheering refugees and the flashes of media drones. But Elias and Lyra did not go out to wave. They sat in the med bay. Elias was bandaging a cut on Lyra's arm. The news feeds were going wild. The evidence was irrefutable. The Aurelian Chancellor had been ousted in a palace coup within the hour. The Terran High Command was conducting a massive internal purge. But the danger wasn't over. Maury interrupted the silence. "Incoming transmission." "Priority Alpha." It is a joint channel. The Aurelian Interim Council and the Terran President. Put it on, Elias said. The holographic emitter hummed. 2 figures appeared. The Terran President, a stern woman with iron-gray hair, and an Aurelian high priest, representing the temporary government. Captain Kane. Lady Vale, the President began. Her tone was not hostile, but it was not friendly. It was the cold tone of power adjusting to a new reality. You have exposed a conspiracy that rotted the heart of both our governments, the priest said. You have saved millions of lives. However, the President cut in. You have also humiliated the military, violated a dozen treaties and stolen state secrets. We did what was necessary, Elias said. Standing up, he placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. We acknowledge that, the priest said, but the galaxy is in chaos. The fleets are restless. We need stability. Lyra Vael, the President said, looking directly at her. You hold the governance protocol. You effectively control the Aurelian Navy's command codes. You are the most dangerous person in existence right now. I do not want the power, Lyra said. I only wanted to survive. That may be, the priest said. But you are a symbol now, the bride who broke the chains. The President leaned forward. An emergency summit has been called on the neutral world of Othris. We are demanding your presence. To arrest us? Elias asked, his eyes narrowing. To negotiate, the President said. If you do not appear, the priest added, his voice grave, the factions loyal to the old Chancellor will use your absence to claim you are a tyrant in the making. They will restart the war to liberate the codes from you. So, the choice is yours, the President said. Come to the summit and help us build something new. Or run, and be hunted for the rest of your lives. We expect you in 24 hours, alive or in chains. The transmission cut. Elias and Lyra looked at each other. The silence of the medbay felt heavy. Alive or in chains, Elias repeated. They still think they can threaten us. Lyra stood up. She winced slightly, but her posture was straight. She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. No longer a map of escape routes, but a map of responsibilities. They are afraid. Elias, she said. They realize that the power doesn't belong to them anymore. She turned to him. The fear was gone from her eyes. In its place was a quiet, terrifying resolve. I am not going in chains, she said. Elias smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile. Good, he said. I didn't bring my dress uniform anyway. He offered her his hand. Ready to finish this? Lyra took his hand. Her grip was strong. Ready. Maury. Elias called out. Prep the ship. We have a summit to crash. The summit hall on the neutral world of Othris was a masterpiece of paranoia disguised as architecture. The entire structure was built of transparent aluminum and suspended over a volcanic caldera, a visual reminder to all delegates that the ground beneath them was unstable. Inside, the air was filtered to a sterile neutrality, and the seating arrangements were calculated to the millimeter to ensure no species felt slighted by elevation or angle. The Aegis had not docked in the main hangar. It had landed on the executive pad, flanked by Terran cruisers and Aurelian heavy destroyers. When the ramp lowered, there was no red carpet. There was only a corridor of silent armored guards. Lyra Vael walked down the ramp. She wore neither the white silk of a bride nor the battered armor of a soldier. She wore a tunic of deep midnight blue, unadorned save for the silver collar of her house, not a slave collar, but a symbol of governance. Her head was high, her hands unclenched at her sides. 2 steps behind her, to her right, walked Elias Kane. He was dressed in his Terran dress grays, but he had stripped the rank insignia from his shoulders. He was armed, his sidearm strapped openly to his hip. The guards had tried to take it. Elias had simply looked at them until they stepped aside. They entered the grand rotunda. The room was vast. On one side sat the Terran delegation, led by President Sterling, a woman whose face was etched with the stress of a collapsing administration. On the other sat the Aurelian Interim Council, a circle of high priests and admirals who looked at Lyra as if she were a radioactive isotope. In the center, floating in a grav chair, was Prince Valerius. He was pale, his body laced with regenerative tubing, but his eyes were open. He watched Lyra approach. The silence in the hall was heavy, pressing against the eardrums. Lyra stopped in the center of the floor. Elias stood beside her, a physical anchor in the sea of political hostility. High Justiciar Kalen, the acting head of the Aurelian delegation, rose. He was a tall man with a mane of silver hair and a voice like crushing gravel. He was also Lyra's uncle. "You have returned," Kalen said, his voice echoing from the vaulted ceiling. "We expected you to flee to the outer rim. It would have been wiser." "I am done running." "Uncle," Lyra said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. "You stand accused of treason," Kalen continued, pacing the dais. "You hijacked a royal vessel. You illegally accessed the governance protocol. You kidnapped a Terran officer. The execution order is still valid. Lyra, you are a dangerous anomaly, a biological weapon aimed at the stability of the Empire." He turned to the Terran president. "We demand she be remanded to our custody immediately for neutralization. It is the only way to ensure the safety of the succession." The president shifted in her seat. She looked at Elias, then at Lyra. "The evidence provided by Captain Kane is compelling. Justiciar," she said cautiously. "But the violation of sovereignty is severe. We cannot simply ignore the law." "The law?" Elias stepped forward. His voice cut through the politeness of the room like a serrated blade. "You speak of law while you sit next to men who sign death warrants for profit." "Silence. Captain," a Terran admiral shouted. "You are here on a flag of truce. Do not test it." "I am not here to test it," Elias said. "I am here to end it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a physical copy of the data drive, the ledger from the syndicate vault. He threw it onto the polished floor. It slid across the room, coming to rest at the feet of the High Justiciar. "That drive contains the communication logs between the syndicate and 3 members of this council," Elias said. "It details the payments made to stage the wedding bombing. It proves that the war was not a necessity. It was a purchase order." Kalen did not look at the drive. He looked at Lyra. "Lies fabricated by a desperate criminal." Kalen sneered. "You have been corrupted by this human, Lyra. He has turned you against your own blood." Lyra looked at the man who had raised her after her parents died. She saw the tightness in his jaw, the sweat beading on his hairline. She realized with a sudden, sickening clarity that he wasn't angry because she was a traitor. He was angry because she was still alive. "I was not corrupted," Lyra said. She took a step toward the dais, and I was not spared by fate. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the admirals, the diplomats, the soldiers. "I was a bride sold to a slaughterhouse to balance a budget," she said. "I was told my death would bring peace, but peace built on the blood of a scapegoat is not peace. It is just a pause between massacres." She looked back at Kalen. "I was not saved by the Empire. I was not saved by the Coalition. I was saved by a man who refused to worship a broken system. A man who looked at the script you wrote and tore it apart." She gestured to Elias. He did not save me because I was a princess. He saved me because he decided that one life mattered more than a convenient war. And that is why you are afraid of us. Not because we are traitors, but because we are proof that you do not own the future. Kalen's face twisted. He pressed a button on his podium. Enough of this theater! Guards! Seize her! The Aurelian royal guard stepped forward, their shock spears leveling. At the same moment, Elias's hand dropped to his weapon. Hold! Prince Valerius's voice was weak, amplified by his chair's speakers, but it commanded attention. The guards hesitated. The prince looked at Lyra. Let her speak, Valerius rasped. It is too late for speeches. Highness! Kalen shouted. He looked desperate now. He looked at the gallery above. Now! Kalen screamed. The gallery exploded. It was not the royal guard who attacked. It was the syndicate. Assassins disguised as diplomatic attachés in the upper balconies threw off their cloaks and opened fire with plasma carbines. Protect the envoys, Elias roared. He didn't dive for cover. He moved in front of the Terran president, deploying a portable energy shield from his belt just as a hail of plasma bolts scorched the air where she had been sitting. The room dissolved into chaos. The syndicate's target was not just Lyra. It was a decapitation strike. They fired at the prince, at the president, at the High Council. They wanted to wipe the board clean and ignite the war in the vacuum of leadership. Gravity anchor disabled. Maury's voice screamed in Elias's earpiece. Captain, the floor is going to go. Elias looked down. The transparent aluminum floor shuddered. The artificial gravity generators whining beneath the deck cut out. The room flipped. Suddenly, up was irrelevant. The delegates floated into the air, screaming. Chairs, data slates, and bodies tumbled in a zero-gravity ballet of panic. Elias kicked off the dais, propelling himself through the air. He grabbed a floating Terran diplomat by the belt and shoved him behind a heavy pillar. Stay down, Elias shouted. He spun in midair, firing his pulse pistol. He took out a sniper on the balcony, the recoil of his weapon sending him spinning backward. He used the momentum to grab a hanging banner, swinging himself around to get a clear line of sight on the prince. Valerius was drifting helplessly, his grav chair dead. An assassin was pushing off the ceiling, a vibro blade in hand, aiming for the prince's throat. Elias let go of the banner. He launched himself across the void. He tackled the assassin in midair, the two of them colliding with bone-jarring force. The vibro blade skittered away, slicing through a holographic flag. Elias punched the assassin, the blow carrying the weight of his momentum. The man went limp. Elias grabbed the prince's chair and activated his mag boots, locking onto a floating support beam to anchor them both. Lyra! Elias shouted over the din of battle. Lyra was in the center of the room. She was not fighting. She was drifting, her eyes closed, her hands raised. She wasn't hiding. She was interfacing. The room was filled with the chaotic energy of the syndicate's weapons and the failing station systems. Lyra reached out with her mind, tapping into the bioluminal network that ran through the Aurelian tech integrated into the summit hall. She felt the panic. She felt the violence, and she felt the dormant command codes of the governance protocol burning in her blood. She opened her eyes. They were glowing with a blinding white light. Silence, she commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a broadcast. She pushed the protocol into the station's environmental controls. She slammed the gravity back on. It hit the room like a physical hammer. Everyone and everything crashed to the floor. The syndicate assassins, caught mid-jump, slammed into the ground with bone-breaking force. The weapons fire stopped as combatants struggled to find their breath. Lyra stood in the center of the carnage. She was the only one who had anticipated the shift. She stood while admirals and assassins groaned on the floor. The holographic banners overhead, which had been displaying the crests of the noble houses, flickered and changed. They resolved into a single, complex geometric pattern, the seal of the override. The Aurelian guards, seeing the symbol, dropped their weapons and fell to their knees. It was an instinctive, conditioned response to the supreme authority of the ancient code. Kalen, who had been hiding behind the podium, looked up. He saw Lyra standing there, bathed in the light of the banners, looking every inch the empress he had tried to kill. You cannot," he stammered. Lyra walked toward him. The sound of her boots on the floor was the only sound in the room. She stopped in front of him. She looked down. "You signed the order," Lyra said. It was not a question. Kalen looked at the prince, then at the terrified council. "It was necessary," he hissed. "The house was bankrupt. Lyra, we were fading. The syndicate offered enough credits to rebuild everything. All I had to do was give them a symbol. A tragedy." "You sold me," Lyra said softly. "You hugged me at the spaceport. You told me to be brave, and you had already counted the money for my corpse." "I did it for the family," Kalen shouted. "I am the family," Lyra said, "and I am the end of your line." She turned to the royal guard. "Arrest him." The guards did not hesitate. They hauled the high justiciar to his feet. He screamed, dragging his heels as they marched him out of the hall. Lyra turned to face the room. The Terran president was getting to her feet, helped by Elias. Prince Valerius was watching her with awe. "The governance protocol is active," Valerius said, his voice trembling. "You hold the override. Lyra, by the ancient laws, you are the regent. You can command the fleets. You can take the throne." The room held its breath. This was the moment the syndicate had feared, the moment the politicians had dreaded, the girl with the power to become a dictator. Lyra looked at the holographic seal floating above her. She felt the hum of the fleets waiting for her command. It would be so easy. She could force the peace. She could crush the syndicate with a thought. She looked at Elias. He was standing by the president, his uniform torn, blood on his cheek. He wasn't looking at the crown. He was looking at her. He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He simply waited, trusting her to be who she was. Lyra looked back at the prince. "No," she said. A gasp went through the hall. "Real power is not about control," Lyra said, her voice ringing clear. "Real power is restraint. It is building a system that does not need a savior to function." She raised her hand. The holographic seal flared, then shattered into a dozen smaller pieces. "I am using the protocol to mandate a new order," she declared. "I am dissolving the absolute authority of the throne. From this day forward, the Empire will be governed by an interim reform council." She pointed to the Terran delegation. "With multi-species oversight, there will be no more secret treaties, no more shadow ledgers, and no more brides sold to bury the truth." She looked at Valerius. "You will rule, Highness, but you will rule with checks and balances. You will rule knowing that if you break the peace, the protocol will not protect you, it will remove you." Valerius bowed his head. "I accept," he whispered. Lyra exhaled. The glow faded from her skin. She wasn't an empress. She was just a woman standing in a room full of broken glass. Elias walked over to her. He didn't say a word. He just stood beside her, his presence a silent wall against the world. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers, treaties, and tribunals. The execution order against Lyra Vile was formally nullified. The Empire issued a public apology, admitting that the traitor bride was a fabrication of a corrupt ministry. The syndicate was dismantled, its assets seized, its leadership hunted down by a joint task force of Terran and Aurelian special forces. Lyra sat in a quiet garden on the planet's surface. It was a real garden with soil and sky, not a hydroponic bay. Elias walked down the path. He was wearing civilian clothes, a leather jacket and dark trousers. It was strange to see him out of uniform. He sat on the bench beside her. "The president offered me my commission back," he said. "Full reinstatement, promotion to admiral. They want me to lead the new joint peacekeeping fleet." Lyra looked at him. "And what did you say?" "I told them I would take the job," Elias said, "on one condition, which is that ethical oversight becomes the first law of the fleet, that every captain has the right to refuse an order that violates their conscience, and that they install a very specific, very annoying AI as the fleet coordinator." Lyra smiled. "Maury is going to run the Navy? God help us all." "He will keep them honest," Elias said, "or at least confuse them so much they can't plot anything nefarious." He turned to her. He took her hand. "They offered you the governorship of the Spire," he said. "I declined," Lyra said. "I negotiated the Vile Treaty instead. No more hostage marriages. No more trading blood for borders." "So you are unemployed," Elias said. "Technically, I am a sovereign consultant with high-level security clearance," Lyra corrected. "But yes, I am out of a job." Elias ran his thumb over her knuckles. "The Aegis is leaving in the morning," he said. "We have a shakedown cruise. We are going to map the unknown sectors of the Kestrel Drift. It is not glamorous. The pay is terrible, and the coffee is worse." He paused, looking into her eyes. "I need a navigator. Lyra, someone who knows how to read the stars." Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling lighter and brighter than the bioluminal codes. "Are you offering me a job, Captain?" "I am offering you a choice," Elias said. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I am asking you to come with me. Not because you have to, not because it saves the galaxy, but because I do not want to see the stars without you." Lyra looked at him. She saw the man who had walked into a prison cell to find her, the man who had held her hand while they cut the Empire out of her skin, the man who had caught her when she fell from the sky. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was slow, deliberate, and full of a promise that had nothing to do with duty. "I choose the stars," she whispered against his lips. "And I choose you." The Aegis drifted in the silence of deep space. The view from the cockpit was magnificent. A field of nebulae stretched out before them, painting the dark in strokes of gold and violet. It was a chaotic, beautiful, uncharted frontier. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, his boots up on the console. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, a holographic map projected in front of her. She wasn't wearing armor. She wasn't wearing a gown. She was wearing one of Elias's oversized shirts and comfortable trousers. She looked completely, utterly free. Maury's voice chimed in through the speakers. "Captain, I feel it is my duty to inform you that your heart rate has been elevated for the last 45 minutes, and Lady Vale's dopamine levels are off the charts. We are fine, Maury," Elias said, not looking away from Lyra. "I am just saying." The AI continued. "According to my original mission parameters, the probability of a disgraced captain and a condemned bride ending up in a stable, long-term romantic partnership while peacefully exploring the galaxy was 0.0004%. Elias smiled. "Never tell me the odds." Maury sighed, a sound of synthesized exasperation. "Statistically impossible happy endings are highly illogical. However, I suppose they are acceptable." Lyra laughed. She reached out and took Elias's hand. He squeezed it, his grip warm and solid. They looked out at the star field together. Behind them lay a galaxy they had saved. Ahead of them lay 1,000 worlds they had yet to see. It wasn't a fairy tale, and the galaxy was still messy. There would be other battles, other storms. But as the Aegis fired its engines and leaped into the light, Lyra Vile knew one thing for certain. She was no longer rewriting her end. She was just beginning her story.